professor or writer, researcher, whatever, they would finance these operations. So, sure, they went to Tibet. Oh my gosh, they did all kinds of stuff. They did a lot of stuff in Scandinavia. Otto Rahn is very famous. He went on a quest for the Holy Grail. They did a lot of stuff.
Well, I can certainly tell you their technology was so much more advanced than ours. And again, although I kind of wonder how did they get so advanced compared to like us? I mean, we didn't have any jets that we were working on during that time frame, and they did, evidently, and which is quite proved that they did. And their technology with the rockets and all that stuff, it's just way ahead of us. But I guess we were an island pretty much. We were isolated in the United States before World War II. So maybe that's why we weren't even looking at that type of stuff.
Well, they had always had a focus on science, right? The Europe in general had always had a focus on science. Here, not so much. I think after World War II that changed. We're now the most technologically advanced. But up until that point, by far the Germans were, and they had been for quite some time. And they focused a substantial amount of effort into it. I mean, look, the Nazis in general, they were very Nietzschean. They follow the concepts of Nietzsche. And one of the things that they had decided to do was to build the Übermensch, the Superman. And so they embarked on a eugenics program. It's not that we couldn't have embarked on a eugenics program, but that wasn't what we wanted to do. We were a country of immigrants. Genetically engineering people wasn't really our scene. We were more interested in other things, and so we didn't do that. But the Germans in the 30s and the 40s, they had a massive program for genetic engineering and selective breeding, and the Lebensborn program, and they put just substantial amounts of money into it. So I'm not surprised that they came out with the first turbine engines, and the Messerschmitt 262, the Comet, which was a rocket-powered plane. They led the world in rocketry and in physics. One of the most scary but fascinating things I ever read, I went through a period of time where I was very interested in nuclear accidents. And I was looking, and oddly, one of the first true nuclear accidents that had taken place was in Werner Heisenberg's lab in Berlin. I believe he was in Berlin. And he had a very rudimentary nuclear kind of reactor, and it suffered a containment leak. And, that's a documented thing. I mean, there are stories that they had detonated a nuclear device of some sort up in Scandinavia on a remote island. They had guns that could fire around corners. I mean, they had just always had a fixation on ballistics and weaponry, and they were very advanced at it. But I definitely believe that that humans built those UFOs, for sure. I think they're alien UFOs, but the German ones are, I think, 100% human.
Well, maybe they, ran across, one that crashed or whatever, and then kind of basically figured out how it works and kind of, build it and modified it, and there was. But I want to kind of move off a little bit, like the missing in national parks. I had one guest on here on the 21st, Andrew. He was talking about, he created a triangle which covered 3 states, and he said that in those 3 national forests that he felt were not so much controlled about our government so much anymore, that they were controlled by, he felt, like aliens, because all the sightings and all this stuff kind of point to it. How's your feeling on something like that? Mine
is from a different point of view. So I've been fascinated by Alternative 3 for years, over a decade. And in Alternative 3, they have a concept of something called a batch consignment. And a batch consignment is basically a group of people who have been abducted against their will to serve as slave labor on a base on the moon or Mars, wherever. And and so you need places to collect people. And so as I was looking at Alternative 3, everything that I had looked at, all the primary facts that are discussed in the film, I was able to correspond to actual events. You know, the blowing a hole in the upper atmosphere thing, the bunkers, all this. I was able to chart it out and to figure out, okay, these actually correspond to this and whatever. And so I thought to myself, well, the only thing I haven't really looked at was batch consignment, probably because it's a bit unpleasant. But I decided, well, if everything else was accurate, the batch consignment thing should be accurate too, unfortunately. And so I was looking around, and I wasn't really finding anything. There are stories about whole villages that disappear and, you know, near the Arctic Circle, or in Africa, you know, you'll go and see this thriving village. You go there a month later or a week later and everybody's gone. And I thought, well, you know, that's probably part of it, but nothing, there should be something else. There should be something that really sticks out. If you're taking as many people as they would have to take, you'd have to be able to see it, something tangible. And so one day I had a brain fart, and I think I was in the shower when it happened. I was actually telling somebody this last night, that I have these brain farts when I'm in the shower. And I've never understood why, but I'm in the shower. And
well,
it's
it's
like,
probably because you're relaxed and your mind starts thinking.
Yeah, and that's actually what they said. Well, so I remembered that I've always been interested in David Paulides' work, or Paulides. I never pronounced his name right, but he does the Missing 411 books, and I had remembered that he had published a photograph of a map that he had made where he put like thumbtacks or pins or something in, where all these disappearances had occurred. And so I went and found that map. And I thought to myself, you know, this looks familiar, but I can't place it. But the distribution looks familiar for some reason, right? And so I'm thinking, and then it dawned on me that back in the 90s, there was a guy named Tall, and Tall had published this map. You know, nowadays you get like a 12th generation photocopy of it. But he had published a map of the western states, and he had designated where he thought there were saucer bases. You know, like UFO bases, underground rail systems, all this kind of stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So I took his map, and then I overlaid it on top of the Paulides map. And I had to stretch it, and I had to kind of bend it to fit. But I lined up the states, because both had the outlines of the states. So I matched the states up. And I figured, well, if I can make the states match, then, you know, I should be in good shape. And when I did that, it turned out that where all these concentrations of disappearances were pretty much where Tall had said there should be a saucer base. Now, Tall contended that those saucer bases were manned by aliens. I would argue, too, that they're manned by people, or maybe aliens, but they lined up for the most part. And I thought that was very interesting.
It is.
So for me, you know, yeah, I aligned it to the concept of the batch consignment. But what it does represent is that, you know, the two things seem to collide, that this possible source of saucers, human, alien, both, whatever, and the disappearances, they seem to line up.
Well, that makes kind of sense, too, because, you know, when you read his book or when you hear him when he's on other shows talking about his book and stuff, it's one thing that's always interesting is that the park rangers and the park police, you know, they really don't keep much records for some weird reason, you know, and they don't do what I classify a real long, thorough investigation. It seems to get wrapped up real quick, and then there's hardly any paperwork traced to it. That I find so strange, you know. And then this one guy was basically saying that this 3 states that are tied into this triangle that the government basically lets them do that in that area. And basically, well, what he says, it allows them to, the people go into those campgrounds or to the national forest, they're subject to whatever. So I don't know.
The part of that bothers me is the wholesale nature of it. That it's like you go into a national park and you're on your own. I don't know that the government would buy into that. But, if it's aliens, I guess they could give them a quota. So, well, you can take X number of people, in exchange for something.
Well, that's a possibility but the thing is, it's been so many people that have vanished. I mean, I've said this so many times on my show that, you're going to have people go into the forest, right? And they're going to fall off a cliff. They're going to get swept down a river and they're gone. Or they get shot by a hunter, or they just keel over dead with a heart attack. But the amount of people who have gone into the national forest is a huge amount that went in and never came back out. And there's so many weird cases of when they did find remains. It's so interesting. I will say this. I get all these people that tell me that aliens are warm, fuzzy creatures, the grays, they give off all these lovable orbs, right? But then when people get abducted, right, they're not saying, hey, Olav, do you want to be abducted here tonight and taken on a spaceship? And we're going to put a prod up or, up you there. We're going to do this to you. We're going to do this to you. We're going to cause you massive amount of pain, but then we're going to kind of erase that out of your mind. But, they're abducting people without asking. They're mutilating people. I mean, there's people just like cattle mutilations, in South America and other places where I've seen photographs of people that were mutilated the same way cattle was. And that scares me. So I can't believe all these aliens, if there are aliens, coming down are warm, fuzzy creatures that give off great lovable orbs.
Well, I think the first problem that we have in ufology in general is that we ascribe human traits to aliens. And I had a linguistics professor that bored me out of my skull. But the one thing that he did drill into my mind was that if you are dealing with something that is alien to you, meaning another culture, right? That their mores, their taboos, their ethos, they're different than yours. And one of the most base examples that I can give you is that I studied anthropology, and one day I come into class and we all sit down, and the professor, she was a very good professor. She said, okay, today we're going to watch a film, and this is a very famous film. It's a very important film for a lot of reasons, one of which is that the team of anthropologists that had done this ethnographic film and documented this society, that they had gone in, funded by the government in New Guinea to document everything, because they were about to force the entire population to be relocated to somewhere else. And in doing that, we're most likely going to destroy large portions of their culture. And so they wanted to record it before they destroyed it. But she said, some of this stuff may not be very palatable to you as a Westerner, but you have to understand this is their culture. They do things their way, and they're not you. But if you're upset by it, feel free to get up and leave. It's okay. You're not going to be graded down on it. Just understand that you have to be morally relativistic when you are looking at opposing cultures or cultures that are not your own. And so we watched the film, and there's one part in particular where a person had died. They do ritual warfare, and they have a kind of blood. They have like blood vengeance, and so somebody had died, and so the family was required to go kill somebody from the other group. And